I am so excited that everyone is so thrilled to see each other. And trust me, Jacksonville Hadassah is so excited about tonight's program. I welcome you all. I am Goldie Lansky, proud to be the president of Jacksonville Hadassah. Tonight is a very special night for Jacksonville, not just because of this wonderful program we are about to enjoy, but because tonight with this program, we are launching a new annual event, which will always happen on the 1st of June. And that is because on June 1st, 1925, Jacksonville Hadassah began. That is the date that we started, and we have been strong and growing stronger ever since. Thank you for joining us from near and far. A special shout out tonight, of course, to Ruth Cohn, who will be sharing her very special story with us. And I want to introduce and thank Stacey Goldring, the very finest partner any organization could hope to have. Stacey is the founder and director of Searching for Identity, which is doing incredibly important work in the area of Holocaust studies and Holocaust understandings. So we're grateful to you, Stacey, for all that you always do, and particularly for tonight. Thank you so much. We usually begin a Hadassah meeting with a Hadassah moment, but this evening's program will end with a Hadassah moment. So please do not leave early. We are especially grateful to welcome Marcy Natan. Marcy is a former national president of Hadassah. And yes, she's also related to Ruth, but that's a sidebar. And Marcy will be delivering the Hadassah moment at the end of the program. So please stay for every last second. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Stacey and Ruth. And thank you so much, Ruth, for sharing your story.
Thank you so much, Goldie, and I'm just so pleased to be here this evening. What started out as a conversation between Ruth and myself has blossomed into this incredibly special evening that we'll enjoy for the next hour. And Ruth, hello.
Hi, Stacey, good to see you.
Good to see you too. So I'm just gonna dig right in. And I'd like you to tell me about your background and your special connection with Israel.
Okay, well, my great-great-grandfather came to Tzfat in 1831, and he became a printer. He was a printer in Bercheshev, but he stopped printing there for a few years, and he immigrated with his family to Tzfat in the northern part of the Holy Land.
Okay.
He operated a printing press there. He was a man of many talents. He was a rabbi. He was an editor. He was a printer. He was a would-be doctor. He did all his own illustrations and his type page printing. The first book, he printed the first Hebrew book in Tzfat in 246 years. And on the screen, you will see, this is the second book he printed. The first book was a prayer book. The second book is the third book of the Torah, Leviticus. And Lador Bedor, two of my granddaughters, had parshas in Leviticus for their bat mitzvot. So that was exciting for us.
Wow. So correct me if I'm wrong, your Israel Bach settles in Tzfat in 1831. Is that correct, Ruth?
Yes.
Well, you can trace your lineage back to the early 1800s then to Israel.
Yeah, he was, well, he wasn't born in Israel. He was born in Beersheba in 1792.
Okay, got it. Okay. And can you go ahead, if we can go to slide, and these slides that you'll be seeing this evening, everyone, they're absolutely remarkable. Ruth's heritage should be a documentary because she is living proof. She manifests the Jewish experience of resilience, family, love, strength. It's just beautiful. So you'll be seeing several photographs this evening that are just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to Ruth's amazing heritage. So here we have Mount Meron. And I understand that today we could even go ahead and take a tour of Mount Meron. Is that correct?
Yeah, there's a story to that, okay? Very recent story.
Tell me.
When the tragedy took place in Mount Meron this past Lag BaOmer, my cousin saw it, and he remembered the connection that our family had with Mount Meron, which I will tell you after I finish this story. And he went and Googled Mount Meron, and he came upon a website called Backpack Tours. Turns out that the woman leading this tour guide, turned out to be a cousin of ours. In the bottom of the website, she gives her bio, and she said she is the great granddaughter of Yisrael Bach. She's 27 years old. Ronnie Krause, my cousin, and I got in touch with her. And she told us, now these, let me just go back to Tzfat for a minute, because, but first of all, I just want to go back to Leviticus, if I may.
You can go
about in the beginning 90s, two of the people here today, Julie Overland and Lori Jenna, Mom and Dad invited us to Washington, and at that time, there was an exhibit at the Library of Congress of the 100 Years of Jewish Archives. And so we went to see the exhibit, and all was walking around looking at all the cabinets and all the exhibits, and all of a sudden, I saw the book of Leviticus, printed by my grandfather, Yisrael Bach. And so I put my face way up against the glass. I couldn't believe it. I never expected to see it. And the security guard came over and he said, you might have to leave if you don't get your face away from the glass. And I said, well, if that was your grandfather's book, you would do the same thing. So we'll go back to Tzfat for a minute. So my grandfather and his family stayed in Tzfat for about 7 years due to a revolt and a very strong earthquake. Yisrael Bach, my grandfather, was wounded. The press was destroyed. And in the meantime, while he was living in Tzfat, the Arab governor, of that area got ill, and my grandfather treated him. And as a gift to him for treating him and the governor getting better, he gave my grandfather a parcel of land in Meron. So in 1837, the family moved to Meron, which is right part of Mount Meron. And Yisrael Bach and his son, my great-great-uncle Nissan Bach, started a farming there in Meron. and also continued with the printing press. And the farm now is referred to, and it's part of the tour. It's part of the tour of backpack tours. It's called Box Ruins, Ruins. It was once a farm, and they also had made a cave to store the crops in. And now the cave is a icy stream. And I never knew that. And I don't know. I just can't believe it. In 1841, they found that the Arab neighbors were not too happy with the Jews living in Meron. So the Bach family moved to Jerusalem, and they were the first Jewish Hasidim in Jerusalem. And my grandfather opened started a printing business again. And in Jerusalem, they printed the first Jewish books ever. They were the first, he and his son Nissan were the first two Hasidic Jews in Jerusalem. And about 1839, they heard that the Grand Rebbe of the Hasidic sect in Segura, Austria, was interested in building a synagogue in Jerusalem for the Hasidim. And so they gave, Nissen was the son of Yisrael, was the architect and the contractor for the synagogue. And he was able to purchase land at an inflated amount right outside of the old city. And you see on the left, you see the beautiful, one of the most beautiful built synagogues in Jerusalem. It was 3 stories high with commanding views of the whole city and beyond. And unfortunately, in the War of Independence in 1948, it was destroyed by the Jordanian Legion. And on your right, you see the destruction of the shul. And the shul was called Tiferet Israel, and it was named after my grandfather as well as the Grand Rebbe of the Hasidic sect. And it was also referred to as the Nissen Bach Shul. And after it being destroyed, until it remained destroyed, and it was until 2012, I'm sorry, that the Jerusalem municipality approved the rebuilding of the synagogue. And in 2018, the cornerstone was laid, and they celebrated. Many dignitaries were invited and attended, and my nephew Brian Scher, who was watching, and his wife Janet were at the synagogue at the celebration that day, as well as my grandson Sam Wisen. And here you see on the left, you see the synagogue with just a little plaster around it. I just don't know when that was taken. And in 2014, I visited Israel, and Sam and I went to see what was going on at Tiferet Israel, and this is what we saw. And
this is such amazing history. And I just, anyone who's involved with the written word clearly is going to be close to my heart. So I just wanted to talk to you one moment about the newspaper. I'm assuming, and maybe Liat can help us with this if she wants to unmute, the newspaper would have been printed in Yiddish, correct? Because they did not speak.
It was printed in, I understand that it was printed in, yes, Yiddish, yes, Yiddish.
I just wanted to make sure. And I think that
It was the second Yiddish paper in Jerusalem.
that's just so incredible.
And here it is, Chabad Zalet. And first it was edited by my grandfather and his son Nisan, my great uncle. And they just published about 5 issues, and they were closed down by the Ottomans. And then about 10 years later, my great uncle, Yisrael Frumkin, who was the son-in-law of Yisrael Bach, I hope everybody gets that. He took over. He started it again. And it was a major organ for the Hasidic in Jerusalem. And Yisrael Frumkin printed until 1911, right up there, 1911.
Amazing.
So that was very, very exciting for us.
Wow. So Ruth, as we've spoken over the months about your family, you know, we came to the conclusion that you are standing on the shoulders of some really incredible, strong women. So I'd love for you to talk about them. And we can start with your Baba Pina. And
okay, well, my Baba Pina, she was my great grandmother. Okay, my maternal grandmother, and so was Yisrael Bach. By the way, he was my maternal grandfather. The Baba Pina was married to a perennial. He was a Rebbe, but he was a perennial student and a sometimes teacher. And so the Baba Pina was she opened a shop selling sacks of flour. And she was the sole breadwinner. I'm sorry for the pun. But, and also she was, the members of the community consulted with her about all kinds of things, plus life events. And my mother adored her. My mother just loved her and always referred during her life to the Baba Pina. And she had 5 sons and 1 daughter. And my mother just thought she was brilliant. In my mother's memoirs, which she wrote in the 1970s, she referred to the Baba Pina as having a head like a prime minister. Well, Golda Meir was the prime minister of Israel in the beginning of the 70s. So she was referring to Golda Meir. So that is the story of my Baba Pina. And it seems that all of my mother's sisters, there were 5 sisters. Let's see, 5 sisters. 5 sisters, 5 girls. And they all stood on the shoulders of Baba Pina and also my grandmother. And on the left and to the right of the picture is my grandmother, Hayasora Blumenfeld, and my mother in our visit to the Holy Land in 1936. That's my mother next to her mother. And the back of her are 2 of my wonderful cousins, may they rest in peace, and their children are, I think, part of the audience here today. And that is my brother Irving in the back. And on the right side is a cousin of mine, Daniel. He was in the Palmach in the War of Independence. And so my grandmother, my grandfather, Moshe Blumenfeld, one of the sons of Baba Pina, married Hadassah Blumenfeld. And after a while, he decided that he was going to see what the Golden Medina, which was America, was like. And so he went to America, and my grandmother stayed back and took care of the children. And she, in order to make things, to have food on the table, etc., she boarded 4 boys that were going to a nearby yeshiva. And according to my mother, Moshe Sharet, the second prime minister of Israel, was one of the boys that she boarded. And now I can refer to the Hadassah because Moshe Sharet was at the hospital in Hadassah when he was so sick. And also there is Sharet Cancer Institute as part of as the 21 buildings at Ein Keren. In fact, Marcia tell us that there's more than 21 buildings now. So that was my grandmother, Hadassah. And then I come to my mother, and it's hard for me to talk about my mother. She was amazing. She married my father in 1911. And my oldest brother, Joe, one of the first babies born in Tel Aviv, was born in 1913. And then in 1914 or 15, the Turks, the Ottomans, started to draft the local men into the army, and my father wasn't going to have any part of the Ottoman army or the Turkish army, and so he came to America. And my mother stayed behind with my brother Joe, and when my brother Joe was 6 years old, she decided it was time to join my father. And so my grandfather, Moshe, arranged passage for her on a boat, which would take her to Liverpool with a stop in Italy. And when they got to Italy, the doctor on the boat, or the doctor that came on the boat, diagnosed them as having trachoma. They were detained in Italy, as well as then they were sent to Paris, detained in Paris, as well as Liverpool. And a trip that would usually take about 20 days or 18 to 20 days turned out to be almost a year. And my mother and Joe landed in Boston, and luckily they met a very fine doctor who cured them and told them to come back every 6 months. Well, for the first year and a half, they did that, but things became pretty terrible for my father and mother as far as finances were concerned. So they neglected to go to return. And when they finally did, the doctor was no longer there, and they were referred to Ellis Island. And so my mother would not leave my brother. My mother was cured, but they made my brother stay. And there was no way that my mother was leaving my brother by himself at Ellis Island. By that time, my brother Simon was born. And so my mother and Simon lived in the women's quarters, and my brother Joe in the men's quarters. And we were observant. And so my mother heard my brother screaming one night that they served him ice cream after meat. They made him eat ice cream after meat, and he was very, very upset. And but after about 12 weeks, they were allowed to go, and they resided in Jersey City, New Jersey, where my father had some family and friends. And so that those were the three women that I think that all of my mother's sisters' shoulders and all of us stand on.
It's a beautiful story.
And just to tie in Hadassah again with my family, and I hope the boys were supposed to be here, and I hope they are, because this is a little surprise for them. This is a letter that Henrietta Zold wrote to my aunt, one of my mother's sisters, who was a nurse. And before Hadassah had a nurse's school, a nursing school, Henrietta Zold was a part of the American Zionist Medical Unit. And so was, excuse me.
People who may not be familiar, Henrietta Zold was the founder of Hadassah.
Hadassah, yes. I'm sorry, yes. And so I guess my aunt was the spokeswoman for the group as far as the nurses were concerned. And so I guess she was asking on their part for a salary increase. And so in 1922, Henrietta Zold wrote a letter to my aunt telling her that their salary is going to be increased. And now on one of my trips as part of Hadassah, after the convention, I stayed with the daughter of Miriam Blumenfeld, and she showed me the letter, and I couldn't believe it. I just couldn't believe it. I brought a copy back for our archives, and here it is. And Meyer, Danny, and Ronnie, there it is. I got it from your cousin Mira.
Thank you.
So that's my tie-in with Hadassah.
Well,
Never knew it until I came when I came to Israel, and my cousin showed me the letter.
it's just remarkable. The history just continues to erupt to the surface, and we are already at 7:32. Ruth, see how it goes so fast. So what we're going to have to do is everyone is going to have to hold on as we fast forward through time and go to New York City circa 1980s. So clearly we're leaving a little history behind for now, but that's just so you'll want more later. So what we're going to focus on now is Ruth in the big city. So I want to go ahead and ask you, Ruth, a few questions, and then we can talk about the slides. Yes, this is how I visualize Ruth. She is definitely, she's Mary Tyler Moore. Anyway.
I wish.
So you were a trailblazer, just like her. So I want to know what Hadassah meant to you prior to you working for Hadassah, and then how you got involved, if you could share those stories, because again, just oozing with history.
Okay, so first let me tell you that that's what Hadassah House up until a few years ago. It was located on 58th Street. It was a wonderful location, and it was a joy to go there every day. I worked hard, but I got a lot more out of Hadassah than I gave Hadassah. As a teenager, I belonged to Junior Mizrahi because I had gone to Mizrahi camps when I was a child. And then when I got married, I belonged to Ort. So I knew very little about Hadassah, except about the job that they had accomplished with Youth Aliyah, getting all those 100,000 children out of Europe. And my cousin Tammy, who is here today, and I went to the Columbus Day Parade in New York. I was working at a law office as an office manager, but I was not happy. And so after the parade, I went up to an employment agency, and they told me about a nonprofit Jewish organization that was looking for an executive assistant to the executive director of Hadassah, and I interviewed with her, and I tested, and I was hired. And I started on January 2nd, 1980. And it opened up a world of just everything for me. It was a wonderful, wonderful experience for me. And on the left, we were partying one afternoon. I guess one of the women or one of the employees was leaving. And so on the left, you see, that's me looking into my pocketbook, but that's Ruth Cohn, the national president of one of the national presidents whom I loved there. And that was Aileen Novick on the right, who was the executive director of that, not the one that interviewed me, but the one that came after her. And on the right is Belle Simon on the left, and a woman that worked with me that I adored, Jerry Meyer, worked for the president, and that's a young Ruth right there on the right. And the rest is really history, but an exciting. And here we have, oh my goodness. On the left is, these women reminded me of Washington, John Adams, and Thomas Jefferson. Especially Frida Lewis on the left was president while I was in Hadassah, but the three were presidents in the 30s and 40s and 50s. And on the left is Miriam Freund Rosenthal, and then Golda Kromowski. My husband adored Golda. And then Judith Epstein. And on the right was Frida Lewis, who became president when I joined Hadassah in 1980.
So do you consider these like the founding mothers of Hadassah? Do you look
yes, Miriam Kromowski and Judith, yes, were three of many, three of about 10 or 11. There was Tamar Poole, who was amazing. They were all amazing. All the Hadassah, 26 of them, I think now, all amazing. But these women were really the matriarchs of Hadassah. And we have a picture now of Esther Gottesman. She was not a president, but she was a vice president, and what a special woman she was. And there you see all of her, the wonderful work that she did for Hadassah. And Esther was chairman of the membership department in 1945 and 50 when the membership of Hadassah doubled. And they had the first national membership convention at the Waldorf Astoria, and they gave the Henrietta Zold Award to Eleanor Roosevelt. And the room was so crowded that the police had to be called, and 3 additional rooms were wired to seat the record crowd. And then Esther went on to be the chairman of what was then the Hadassah newsletter, and at her suggestion was changed to the Hadassah magazine. And she had fantastic writers, outstanding writers, like outstanding men and women, like Dr. Yigal Yadin, the famous archaeologist.
one of his
And
books?
at that time, shepherds near Qumran Ram found these large clay jars, and in the jars were scrolls. And I don't want to go into the whole story, but Yigal, the archaeologist, wanted part of the scrolls for the state of Israel. And Israel, the state could not afford them at that time because they had big expenses with immigration. And so Yigal got in touch with Esther, and Esther's brother-in-law wanted to do something special for the state of Israel. And so he bought the scrolls for the state with one condition, that the state provide a home for the scrolls. In the meantime, her brother-in-law Sam passed away, and in memory of him, the family contributed the full amount to build the shrine of the book. And it was thanks to Esther that happened.
Just amazing.
And I thoroughly,
From the printing press to the Dead Sea Scrolls, you're like 6 degrees of separation. You're like Kevin Bacon, excuse the reference to the breakfast food. But it's amazing. It's just incredible. Okay, who is this amazing woman? Tell us about Miriam.
well, I just want to tell you something about the scrolls.
Okay.
The man that bought them off a cobbler who the shepherds gave them to, he tried to sell them, or even to universities and colleges. He offered them to Yale, and Yale didn't take it. He finally put an advertisement in the Wall Street Journal, and that's where Dr. Yadin found them. So at first he wanted $1 million. This is the fellow that was selling them. He was the Syrian Archbishop in Jerusalem, and he wanted $1 million, but they got him down to $250,000. So that, can you imagine that they had to be advertised in the Wall Street Journal?
I'm telling you, no one knew this until right now.
Well, it's, I mean, I didn't know it, okay? I didn't know it. And so here comes my Miriam. Miriam lost her second husband in 1989. And at our convention in Atlanta, she sat in the office with us. And we got to be good friends. And when she came, and she moved back to New York after his death, and she had an apartment diagonally across from Hadassah House on Central Park South. And Hadassah always had desks for past presidents. And so those that lived in New York or New Jersey or Pennsylvania came in very often. And Miriam used to come in also on Fridays when the chairmen did not come in. And so Miriam used to take me over to the Helmsley Plaza for lunch and tell me stories of Hadassah. And one of the stories was she had, since she was a child, she had two dreams. One was to go to the Holy Land, and the other was to research and study Jewish history. And when she was 28 years old, those two dreams were realized. She received her doctorate in history from NYU, and she went to Israel, to the Holy Land, via ship. It was a very tedious trip for her, but she was compensated with a meeting in Henrietta Zoll's room at a hotel for the non-government council. And Henrietta Zoll was the chairman of the council. And Miriam sat across from Henrietta Zoll at the meeting, and Henrietta Zoll told her that she knew her mother and had visited them at their home in Perth Amboy, and in fact went on a membership drive with Miriam's mother. And so when Miriam came back to America, she joined her mother at a meeting at the Borough Park chapter of Hadassah, which was in Brooklyn, of course. And she made a speech, and she told me that she made a speech for Hadassah, and she never stopped speaking for Hadassah until, well, she said until now, but of course. And that was in the 1990s, the early 1990s, because she passed away in 1998. Mm-hmm. And I have another story, a wonderful story about Miriam and Marc Chagall. In 1959, they were planning the rebuilding of, earlier than that, in fact, but in 1959, they were thinking about what they would do in the synagogue at Ein Kerem. And so they decided perhaps they'll ask Marc Chagall to do stained glass windows for them, maybe 2 or 3. And so they went to a firm in New Jersey just to get a price so they know what to expect. And the firm told Miriam about $100,000. Well, that was absolutely, Hadassah thought that would be absolutely ridiculous. I mean, Chagall was a world-renowned artist. But Miriam and Isaac Stern, who was a very, very close friend of Marc Chagall, and the architect, Dr. Joseph Neufeld, went to see Marc Chagall at his home. And Miriam had an opportunity to talk to Marc Chagall's wife. And his wife told her that Mr. Chagall was providing artists' work, his work, to almost everyone else in the world except the Jewish people. And he was waiting to hear from the Jewish people. He wanted to do something for them. And so Miriam got very excited, and they drew up a plan and he looked at it and he accepted it. And he did research and worked on it for 2 years. And what we have are the 12 stained glass windows at the Abel Synagogue. And they are the 12 tribes, the 12 sons of Jacob, and with Jacob blessing each of his sons. Just amazing. And Miriam used to visit Marc Chagall every year on his birthday. And in Yiddish, he would always ask her, "How goes it in our country?" So I thought that was a very, very exciting story. Yeah. And then the third, just a second, Judith, we'll get to you. Just let me tell you about do we have time? I'm sorry.
Well, we're at 49. We're at 7:49, our time. So please go ahead.
So this will be a quick one. Okay, at the dedication of Ein Kerem in 1960, the celebration included Prime Minister Ben-Gurion, Finance Minister Golda Meir, and a lot of dignitaries and members. I think there was about 3,000 people at the dedication. And the man who stole the show was Ogden Reed, the ambassador to Israel from the United States, who recited part of Psalm 121 in Hebrew. And I knew that I would forget it because I'm a little bit nervous. So I copied it down. I looked to the mountain let's see how it goes. Oh, here we are. Let me put my glasses down. I lift my eyes unto the mountain, and my help comes from the Lord. And so that was the dedication of Ein Kerem, and an exciting one. So now we can show another one of my favorites, Judith Epstein.
Tell us.
The 75th anniversary of Hadassah, we were in Israel for the important part of it. And at that, Ruth Cohn was our president at that time, and Ruth and Teddy Kollek, mayor of Jerusalem, rode in a horse-drawn wagon. It was Purim as well. And they rode in a horse-drawn wagon through the streets of Jerusalem with the women marching and singing and dancing. It was very, very, very exciting. And one of the fortuitous occasions for me was I was walking through the old city one evening during the 75th celebration, and Judith was walking with another wonderful, wonderful woman from Hadassah, brilliant, Ruth Cohn. And they were both in their late 80s. And so I ran ahead and grabbed each of their arms and walked with them. And Judith related stories to us. And one of them was when she first joined Hadassah and she was just married a year. There was a very, must have been a very exciting meeting because she did not get home until 1 o'clock. And when she got home at 1 o'clock, her husband said he had called the police. He didn't know where she was, and he was as frightened as can be. So that was Judith. And she made a wonderful contributions to Hadassah. Every president did. Every president, every member of the national board was quite something. But Judith told a story that happened, that she heard from about a nurse at Ein Kerem, a head nurse, and this was during the '67 war. The head nurse's son was a paratrooper, and the paratroopers were a stellar group who captured Jerusalem for the Jews. And she got a call 5:30 in the morning. She was so afraid it was the worst. But she took the call, and it was her son. And her son told her, Mom, in 15 minutes, we are returning. We're up here at Mount Scopus, at Mount Scopus, the location of the first hospital that was captured during the War of Independence. And so he said, in 10 minutes, we are going to return to you what you lost 19 years ago. That was very exciting, and it was exciting to Judith, and I can imagine how exciting that must have been.
We have a collage that I'm just going to ask Helen to put on the screen of some of the amazing people that you got to meet while
I'll tell you first about Kirk Douglas, okay? Yeah. My first trip to Israel in 1982 with Hadassah, and my husband was able to come with me. Kirk Douglas was making the movie Remembrance of Love, and the company was at the Hilton, where most of the Hadassah National Board was staying. So I used to see Kirk Douglas in the lobby all the time. Mm. And he was as handsome as you think he was, or you thought he was. And then Harry Belafonte was at a national board meeting. He was and he is an activist, so he was very interested in relations between the Jews and the African-American community. And then Joe Biden was at our convention in Baltimore. Let's see, well, of course, Elie Wiesel, we all recognize.
Right.
And is that Menachem Begin?
Yes, so can we go ahead and you can.
I'm sorry. And of course, Menachem Begin was at spoke at one of our conventions. And George Shultz spoke at one of our conventions. And I don't know, I think Joyce is on this call, on this Zoom call, but when Joyce was chairman of one of the conventions that took place in New York, Marvin Hamlisch was our guest. And I remember Marvin Hamlisch got up on the stage to play, and sort of an introduction, he said, "Oh, I'm so happy to be here," he said, and he added, "My aunt was a member of Hadassah." And I got a kick out of that. And many more, Rabin and Perez, and my husband was with me at that convention as well. So we got to meet them and hear them speak. And
Can you talk about
it
this?
was a wonderful ride, a wonderful ride.
Can you talk about the serenade by the elevators?
Oh my goodness, this is a wonderful story. This is a wonderful story. The executive staff was invited to eat in the National Board dining room, and we had our own. The employees had our own table, and one day, one of our the director of the Jewish Education Department, Miriam Wexler, told us a story, and I still laugh when I tell it. And in fact, I spoke to one of my coworkers at Hadassah today, and we laughed about it. It seems that every time a dignitary from out of the country was at the plaza on 59th Street and Fifth Avenue, the flag of the country the person represented would hang out in the front of the building. And so Irene Wexler, that's what was her name, Irene Wexler, I'm sorry. And Irene must have noticed coming to work or whatever that the flag of Israel was hanging in front of the plaza. And I don't know how she found out, but she and a few friends found out that it was Prime Minister Begin staying at the plaza. And they got together, and somehow, whether they guessed or they found out, that Governor Kerry was visiting Begin in his room at the plaza, and they would be coming down in the elevator. And so they surrounded the elevators, outside of the elevators on the lobby floor. And when the door opened on the lobby floor, these women stood there and sang Hatikva. And Menachem Begin could not move, either did Kerry, and they took off their hats. Here it was in the 70s when men wore, it was in the 80s, I'm sorry, when men were still wearing hats, or a little time before that. And they stood there as the women sang Hadassah, sang Hatikva. And I'm picturing it, and it still amazes me.
Such amazing imagery.
Stacey, I'm sorry.
I said it's such amazing imagery. You paint so many beautiful vignettes, that have taken us, over, almost 200 years. It's just absolutely incredible, Ruth. And I think that Israel's history and Hadassah's history, clearly, this is a parallel, this is a symbiotic relationship of love and growth and support. So if we can look at the slide of the hospital and how it's evolved over the years. And I guess what I wanted, what we had discussed, Ruth, and then I would like to bring in a very special guest for a moment. I was curious what the role of Hadassah is today and what does it look like moving forward. So if we have royalty with us today, in addition to Ruth. We have Marcy Natan, who is the past national president of Hadassah from 2011 to 2015. And if Marcy could be so kind, I would love to get, and Ruth also, if you could just tell us very briefly, we're already to the top of the hour, maybe 2 or 3 programs that Hadassah is very excited about as we look to the future. And Helen can put the information, in the chat of the links, etc. So I'm going to hand it over to Marcy.
Thank you. Yeah, okay. Thank you, Stacey. I have to say, Ruth, you have a memory that is priceless. I'm absolutely in awe, and I hope everybody is really appreciating the amazing information we've gotten right now. Because we have very little time and where we are at this moment, I want to say that we are so proud of the recent fighting against anti-Semitism and our involvement in the Never Again Education Act. I'm going to ask everyone, go on Hadassah's website, because there's no way I can give you enough information in the very short time I have. You'll see information about the nurses, what they've done during COVID, what they did during the war, the amazing surgery that we just did, transplanting from an Orthodox Jew who was killed by the Palestinians during the war and transplanted into a woman who is a Palestinian Christian. Only at Hadassah could something like that happen. You mentioned, Ruth, the Charette Institute of Oncology, amazing efforts being made there on cancer research and cancer treatment. And it's an area that is in desperate need of some renovation. So know that your contributions to Hadassah helping to make things like that possible. Youth Aliyah has come out of this pandemic and the war, only looking forward to the future. And these kids that you are educating are really the future of Hadassah. And they will be celebrating graduation this month. And again, that information, we're going to get it up on the website for you. So I would just close by saying we've got some missions coming up. And those of you who have been to Israel know nothing that we can do has the impact of actually being there. We've got to get the young people to Israel. There will be a mission in August, our first efforts to get back to Israel. And in November, which I personally feel will be a little bit safer and easier, there are still pretty strict restrictions, there will be a keeper's mission to Israel. And if any of you or you can encourage people to attend, come to Israel with Hadassah. And Ruth, again, my cousin, thank you so much. And I want to recognize Heidi Natan, who you should be able to see on the screen, who is also a cousin and my daughter. Thank you.
Well,
back to you.
Thank you so much, Marcy. And hello, Heidi, another generation of amazing, incredible women. And if you could just for a minute, go ahead and scroll through and look at all the amazing, beautiful faces and hearts and beautiful souls who are attending this evening. And we have Hadassah to thank for giving us this opportunity to come together. And as many of you know, I'm passionate about the written word. And I love the stories that Ruth is telling, and I'm hoping to capture more. So if you're interested in being a part of a writing workshop, so you will never, ever have to worry about why didn't I ask? We'll be searching for identity. We'll be starting a writing workshop in the fall, and you can just go ahead and get a hold of me or get a hold of Helen or Goldie, and we'll go ahead and make sure you can get on that list. And I always ask two questions when we're wrapping up. And the first question I have, is there a question, Ruth, I didn't ask?
Yes, there is, Stacey. And the question was, the question is, how many times did I fall asleep on the bus coming home from Hadassah and having to ride at least 3 stops before a drugstore so that I could call my husband to come get me to my car or to take me home?
That is so great. I love that.
A lot of times, Stacey, a lot of times. And only my husband, may he rest in peace, had the patience every time to come get me.
That is a beautiful memory and a wonderful way to wrap. And lastly, Ruth, can you tell us what you're reading?
I'm reading the second book of a trilogy called The Country Girls by Edna O'Brien. It is part of our book club recommendation, and Stacey Goldring is our facilitator. How lucky can you get? There's the book.
Oh my gosh, that was not planned. You are just too much. Well, I want to raise my glass in a l'chaim to Ruth. This has been
Helen, where are you?
Helen, thank you.
Oh, there you are. Okay.
Yeah, everyone, Marcy, for everything, for making the time. Your time is precious. L'chaim, and thank you so much.
Thank you so much with your wonderful stories. Stacey, for your ability to get these stories and share that with all of us. It's been a wonderful, wonderful evening. It's also a reminder that we've got to take the time to really ask our family members of our Hadassah chapter, tell us their life stories so they don't get lost. You were very lucky, Ruth, that your mom wrote so many things down. And so you have a lot of family stories. I have to just also say you have a lot of family members on Wikipedia going back for several generations. I don't think most of us have that. So we really need to share those stories. And Stacey did indicate she has a writing workshop coming up to help us do that. So our children and our grandchildren won't have to say, why didn't I ask? So we're really glad, and you will be getting more information about that workshop. I just have to say also, Ruth, it's been such a ball working with you to prepare for this evening's program. I have grown to just adore you. I love the visualization of women, of standing on the shoulders of strong women. And I think that was just such a powerful image. You exemplify that. Your 2 daughters, your grandchildren, your great-grandchildren have those shoulders to stand on with you. And I think they got even a little wider tonight. So I just, again, thank you so much. And as the programs and advocacy chairman for Jacksonville Hadassah, I have to end with one quick plug. And that is that tomorrow evening, we start a 3-part series with more strong women. It's called Jewish Women, Radicals, Rebels, and Reformers. It's a 3-part series, June 2nd, 16, and 30. We hope you'll join us. You can email me at jacksonvillehadassah@gmail.com, and I'll send you the information.